All right, welcome to the 7th video in our series looking at compiling a prototype application for our digital solutions. So far we've covered aspects of interface and algorithms, and so what we're going to start looking at today is folding in the third component, which is our data. So in order to achieve that, we're going to look at building a database, adding in some functions to run our SQL queries, and then obviously apply it to our login module that we've been working on up to this point. So in order to keep it all nice and tidy, because the database is something we're going to want to add to multiple applications going forward, is we will set up a separate library file similar to our objects library that we created previously for all of our database methods and attributes. So first thing we want to do is create a new text file, new file, whichever you like, and straight away we're going to save it, and we'll just call this db for database.py. Alright, so similar to our library Python file. I should say this is saved in the same location as our other files, so our main file, our screens KV, and our library Python file. So yeah, this is exclusively for all of our database actions, which we'll then import into our main Python file and interact with our application. So as we go through this, we're going to use an SQLite database. I should have started by suggesting that. So obviously there's different versions or different flavors of SQL that we could look at, whether it's Access SQL, MySQL, the two that come to mind straight away. But SQLite is one that we're going to use, mostly because it is quite easy to add into our Python application, and also because how easy it is to set up, and it can be done using code in Python. So obviously the first one's a bit hard, but once we've set it up, you know, it's all set up for future versions. It's just a case of entering in your information and it's done. So as we work through these methods that we're going to add to this library, these all basically will be borrowed from this website here, so SQLitetutorial.net. So this is really great, covers all the SQL functionalities, you know, around different queries. If we scroll down further, even looking at creating, inserting, updating, all the sort of actions that we want to do, some more advanced stuff. And then down the bottom here, you can see how we can interact or interface, SQLite with different languages. So PHP, so if you're doing a web application, you can follow those instructions. Java, Node.js, but obviously we're looking at Python. So this is where we'll be borrowing a lot of information from. So creating a database, creating tables, inserting data, and so on. So essentially what we want to do is add all those to our database library, and then we can use it to connect or create a database initially, add some tables in initial data, and then we can access that data within our main application. So the first thing we need to do whenever we're interacting with the database is we need to create a connection to it. And so the connection also actually ties in with the creation of the database, and we'll talk about that as we go. So first thing we want to do is import the SQLite 3 package. So the SQLite 3 package is all the pre-built functions in Python for interacting with an SQLite database. Another reason why we chose that option, makes it super easy to interact with if a lot of the heavy lifting is already done for us. And from this library, we are going to import the error object. And this just basically handles error messages, if there's a connection issue with our database, which hopefully we will not have. All right, so Control S, save as you go. So the first method we're going to do or to add is a create connection. And we're going to pass in an attribute of the database file name. So essentially, what we're going to do is create a situation where any database file that we have within our folder can be connected to in our application. So obviously we'll pass that in as a parameter in the main function. So the first thing we want to do, so let's click in the wrong area. So the first thing we want to do is to just clear out any existing connection so that wires don't get crossed, that sort of thing. All right, so we'll also just take the parameter of the file name that we've passed in and just store that so that we can obviously access it down the track. We then want to also point to the directories. So the base directories, this is looking for the current folder where we're at. And we are going to use another library, sorry, that we forgot to add earlier, but that's okay. Remember, the yellow squiggle helps us with that. So OS short for operating system, I'll just import that so the error goes away. So within the OS library, we're going to use the path object and the directory name method. And basically what we're asking is for the directory of the current file. So dunder file refers to db.py. So what folder is this file being saved in? Because sometimes when you're running your connection to your database using Python, is it will start at Python's base directory. So if you've installed Python in just your C drive and you're working in a different drive, you can see I'm currently working in a D drive. That's going to create a bit of an issue. It's going to look for a database file within your Python installation location. So we're just sort of forcing it to look in the same place as this. So we've got our file path, we've got our file name, we just want to mash all them together. So I'm going to call it db path. So the full path of where the database is stored. And we're going to join up the base directory as well as the file name. So now that I've thought about it, what I'm going to do is say db file name. Now I'm actually going to get rid of this line. We don't need to refer to it because we can just put it straight into here. Right, so this is the path where we want to, in the file name we want to look for. So basically when we're creating a connection, we say look in the same folder as this db Python file, which should be in the same folder as your main Python file and all your other application files. The path is this directory plus this file name that we've passed in as a parameter to create connection. And then simply we need to create the connection. So connection is just equal to create connection on the DB path. All right, and once we've done that, we want to return the connection so that we can connect with it in our main application and access that database. Oh no, sorry, so create connection, that was the name of, that's what we called it up here. Sorry, I was referring to two different things. So we want to change this slightly. So we're trying to refer to itself. So SQLite 3, sorry, dot connect. That's the method we want to run to actually create that. And just let me catch my spot. And then just so that we know it's been successful, we want to return or print SQLite 3 dot version. So this will basically just tell us which version of SQLite we've connected to when we do so. Alright, so that's the base of what we would need to connect and create a database in Python. But before we run it, we're going to add in what we call an exception. So I guess an exception is just a fancy way of error handling. All right, so this is where this error object will come in. So rather than just running this as is, what we're going to do before we connect is we're going to use keyword try. And this is just basically like an if statement. So we want to try these actions, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, well then we're going to do something else. All right, so we're going to try connecting and printing out the SQLite version. And then instead of saying else, we use the word except. So this is why it's called an exception. And except if there's an error, and we're just going to refer to that as E. You don't necessarily have to do that, but just to show you how it works. And also, like I said, that's how it's presented on the SQLite tutorial. So we'll stick with it. What we're saying is, try to do this action, and if it works, success. If it doesn't, so else, we're going to print out the error message. All right, and then, if it does work, it'll return the connection. Obviously, if it doesn't, there's nothing to return. It'll just print that error message. All right, so that does look a lot better. All right, so yep, I have saved it. Remember, Control S is your friend. And now it's just a case of we want to run this in our main application so that we can actually create a database and connect to it. All right, so because we want this to work between all of our screens, the best place for it is probably within our application. So when we build our application, we're going to connect to the database and stay connected. Obviously, if you have different database files that you want to click and change and connect to, you could, but might be a bit inefficient. So what we're going to do is add it in here. So it doesn't particularly matter where. I might just add it after our interface stuff just to keep it separate. So because we want to access it from the DB file, I did forget we do need to import the DB also along with our library, our database file. So db.create connection, and then this is where I want to put the file name. So I'm going to call it users.db. So the .db part is the important part. That creates a database file, an SQLite database file. And I guess just to show you that this code does work, well, hopefully it works. I haven't run it yet, obviously. But I will just quickly bring in the file or the folder location. So for this project, so you can see we've got the DB Python file, library Python file, main, and screens, Kiwi file. Alright, so once I save this and hit the play button, what I'm hoping for is it runs the interface, so that's a good sign. Usually means there's no errors. But in the terminal, you might also notice there's this 2.6.0. And so essentially that is printing our version of SQLite 3. So I'm not sure why it's 2.6 when it's SQLite 3. I'll put my hand up right now and say that. It's not important. I guess the important thing is that we've tried to connect and we have, and to confirm that that's been printed in there. You could obviously change this message to say database connected if that makes life easier for you. But just showing off, some of the code, and like I said again, this is matching very closely to the SQLite tutorial. All right, and as I said, the interface all looks the same, but the big difference we're hoping for is in the school planner project. So now you'll see that there's a file at the bottom called users.db. All right, so because we didn't already have that connected, or we didn't already have that file, part of the SQLite 3 package, when we connect, is if it doesn't exist, it will actually create that file for us and then connect to it. All right, so you could go and set it up, but if you're setting up lots of databases, or for whatever reason you want to have separate files for different things, having this code set up makes it super easy, because as you can see, it's just a case of running it with the particular file name you want, and bam, you've got yourself a new database. Excuse me there just for that moment. So now that we've got our connection, the next step is to add tables, add values to those tables, start to really flesh out this, database Python library, and then obviously use that in our application. But we'll wrap that video up there. So thank you very much for watching and following along. See you in the next one.